Welcome to The Rec Room with Mandy and Mio, a podcast about books and the people who write them.
Hello and welcome everyone. This is a podcast called The Rec Room with Mandy and Mio, where we ask the question, when does a writer's work become a required reading? In each episode, we take popular authors of the day and review each entry in their bibliographies to see just how close these writers get to the sweet spot between mainstream breakout success and traditional literary sensibility. My name is Mia.
And I'm Mandy.
And we're here at the start of a new mini-series. So welcome, everyone. You know, if this is your first time to listen to our show, but this might be like a good entry point for you because this is a mini-series where we're examining a certain author's work, and as we explained 2 episodes ago, this is an author who neither of us really have much context for. It's not like Sally Rooney, who I read and whose work I fell in love with before we started the podcast, or Madeline Miller, who you developed like this great fondness for from college onwards. This is someone who we tried.
We have none of that experience.
Yeah, we tried. We each read the same book of hers. You were telling me that you didn't quite finish it, and I
didn't finish it.
I finished it.
And I don't remember what it's about.
I didn't really appreciate it that much. Yeah. But I almost feel like now, in retrospect, that was the wrong place to start with the work of Zadie Smith. So we each read Swing Time, and my understanding is that that's her most recent novel, and it's going to be one of the latter books that we cover in this mini-series.
And I would feel, I don't know about you, but like that's how I discovered her also.
Right, and is
it her most popular?
No, I'm like almost sure that this first book, White Teeth, is perhaps her most popular book. It's really the one that she broke out into the scene with. And as I'll mention later, it caused like quite a stir in the literary world. Yeah. But this is the book that a lot of people like associate with her, and it's been included in like best of lists. Like I think even for the best of decade list that came out around that time.
For like 2010.
Yeah, from 2000 to 2010 it was included in that. I remember reading somewhere that was the case. But otherwise, like, we came into her work very late. Especially, which is like, and it's also funny because if you compare Swing Time to this novel, they're very different books. You would almost be convinced that they were very different writers.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited to see just how we fill up this blind spot, essentially, in our knowledge of Zadie Smith. So Zadie Smith is a writer. She's a British writer whose mother grew up in Jamaica and emigrated to England. And she was, as a child, she was fond of tap dancing, so you already have the roots laid down there for what will eventually be Swing Time. But in general, she had this very wide orientation to arts. So she was a very artsy child. Like she, at some point, she considered musical theater. There was a point where she's had a job as a jazz singer, and then she also wanted to write for the newspaper. So eventually, over time, that kind of just like narrowed down until she became a writer. She just became interested in literature. She ended up going to King's College in Cambridge, where she studied English literature. And there's an interesting anecdote about when she was in Cambridge, which you and I, we both like locked on to this. Is that there's apparently I double checked the source for this story, and it was saying that it wasn't really going into much detail about how true this was or what the connection was between them. But apparently, Zadie Smith had been rejected for a place in
Footlights.
It's a comedy group called the Cambridge Footlights, and they were rejected. She was rejected apparently by the now famous comedy duo Mitchell and Webb, while all 3 of them were studying in Cambridge in the 1990s. Yeah. So I checked the source for that. I don't know, like, they never really attributed that story, so I don't know if it's really true or if it's apocryphal, but, it claims that...
But that maybe it's one of those, like, Footlights, like, what do you call it, myth stories that you have in orgs.
Yeah.
Especially orgs that are, like, born a lot of famous people.
Right. Yeah. Like, I mean, like, we've always had our share of those kinds of stories.
Yeah.
Like, do you know that story, right, about, like, the theater org that we were both in? There was a story about, the story about Nick Joaquin. The university we went to, the drama club that Mandy and I were both members of, there was once a production, an adaptation of Nick Joaquin's short story, Mayday Eve, and they had adapted it into a play. And
you weren't in school yet, right?
No, this was like way before. Like Nick.
Oh yeah, that's right. He's been dead a long time. Sorry.
Yeah, Nick Joaquin.
So this was like what, 2000?
I would say like maybe late 2000s, but still before I arrived as a freshman. And so they managed to invite him to one of the performances, and amazingly, he came to our university. And the story...
Because he was friends with one of our professors.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes absolute sense.
Right?
But the story is that during the performance of Mayday Eve, there was a point where someone was holding a bottle of San Miguel Pale Pilsen, and then in the middle...
Well, obviously it was a prop.
Yeah, obviously a prop.
And I had heard from somebody that it was actually just filled with water.
Yeah, because our school famously does not allow alcohol.
Yeah, we can't drink. Also, we can't drink on campus.
Yeah.
To any English people listening to this, we don't have pubs on campus here.
Any non-Filipino person.
Oh, that's actually true.
I imagine they have... I imagine they have pubs and bars and campuses all over, not just England. But anyway, like... in the middle of the performance, so the Pale Pilsen bottle comes out, and in the middle of the performance, there's a voice that comes out of nowhere and just goes like, "Hey, that's mine." And Nick Joaquin lumbers onto the stage, grabs the Pale Pilsen, walks off, and he drinks it, and like doesn't complain about it, even though we've already established that it's water
that it's
inside.
Water.
He's just like, I guess I'm thirsty.
Yeah. Anyway, that's my favorite.
Yeah, that's my favorite
story.
Sort of apocryphal
story. So maybe in Footlights, there's this like, Mitchell and Webb.
It's like, yeah, or like maybe like Mitchell and Webb were like members at the time, but they weren't part of the committee that was like, who's this Zadie Smith woman?
Mitchell became president.
Yeah, but like surely he wasn't the one who said no, not for us. I mean, that's weird. I don't know what the process for like admission into the Cambridge Footlights is. Maybe you know a bit more about it than me. But it feels a little weird to me that this is how greatness clashed back in the 90s in Cambridge.
I know. That's like if you found out, like if there's probably an AU where Emma Thompson did not get into Footlights.
Yeah. Okay, so
and it was just Hugh and Stephen Fry.
Right, and maybe Love Actually would have been the worst for it.
What?
Anyway, what am I saying? So Cambridge, we're still talking about Zadie Smith in Cambridge. Now, the important thing about Zadie Smith in Cambridge is what she did get into was a student writing anthology called The Maze Anthology, and she'd published a number of short stories in that collection. And The Maze Anthology is like this, it's this big traditional anthology that every few years, people, like big writers will come in and they will edit it. And Zadie Smith herself came back in 2001 to edit the Maze Anthology herself.
Oh, wow.
And the stories that she published there attracted the attention of a publisher who offered her a contract for her first novel. And that was like already the signal for her, like, hey, you should probably get an agent. So she did. And in 1997, before White Teeth was even finished, the manuscript was accepted by the publishing world. And there was an auction for the rights about who would publish it, which was eventually won by Hamish Hamilton. So Zadie Smith managed to finish White Teeth while she was still in Cambridge during her final year. And in 2000, the novel immediately became a bestseller and received much acclaim. And among the accolades it gained, it was awarded the James Tate Black Memorial Prize and the Betty Trask Award. But the other important thing about White Teeth was that it also caused a stir, as I mentioned earlier, I think. It caused a stir in the literary world after the literary critic James Wood published an essay where he identified Zadie Smith's novel White Teeth as part of an emerging movement called hysterical realism. I'm
sorry, that's hysterical?
Yeah, hysterical realism. And it's sort of funny because, like, if you go deep into it, like, okay, so hysterical realism, I'm gonna try to describe it without necessarily using the terms that James Wood or any others in the group, because I've read some of the authors associated with this movement. So, like, David Foster Wallace is a popular figure within hysterical realism as a genre, and yeah, I mean, as you know, I was very big on him in college, and like between him and Zadie Smith, I definitely saw a lot of similarities in terms of like trying to show an expansiveness in terms of the world. So like we've sometimes mentioned, I think, with previous episodes and previous books, how some writers really put themselves into world building. But like sort of the thing that I noticed here with White Teeth, and I'm wondering how much more we'll see it in her other books as well. Almost every sentence of White Teeth, there is something happening.
Yeah.
It's so hyperactive and so hyperkinetic, which is not a bad thing to say, but it's so different from someone like, say, Ian McEwan, who, like, I read on Chesil Beach earlier this year, and that whole book is, like, just paced with silence. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there are some times where he just, like, allows the book to breathe.
Yeah.
But here, it's really like, okay, so now I'm going to refer back to James Wood. James Wood was saying information has become sort of the new character, making human feeling kind of absent. Which is something I completely disagree with.
Yeah, I was about to say. Yeah,
like
I don't think that's the case with this at all.
Like, there's an aspect of it where information is definitely abundant and almost overabundant in excess in this novel, but I don't feel like it takes away from the emotion at all. So, like, it's almost
like it adds to it.
Yeah, like it's almost
because like it makes you feel like every moment is so urgent, even to the people who are not being. Who have no sense of urgency, you know?
I mean, like, to kind of, like, jump ahead a little bit, like, in the first scene alone, you're introduced to, like, someone who's basically a main character, and then you're introduced to, like, some other side characters.
Okay, I was gonna say,
But those side characters are, like, already invested with such importance from the get-go that you feel like, okay, no, I feel like these guys are important to the scene. And, like, she's clearly taken the time to give them some attention and to give them texture. Without making it feel superfluous.
Yeah. And then, you know, again, also not to jump ahead, but like when that all circles back.
Yeah, she brings them back. That's right.
Yeah, you're kind of just like, oh, okay. Like it wasn't, like, I mean, like in the beginning, I also did kind of feel like, you know, that character wouldn't be a throwaway guy.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where, it kind of made me feel like it was like you know that improv rule? That's like, the way to bring back a bit.
Oh, it's when people have forgotten.
Yeah. That it's like that's kind of what she was doing. That she did so many things in the middle, so that when she rounds out everything at the end, you're like fist pumping, and you're like, all right.
Yeah.
And I was gonna also say that like she's just like a more like a overstimulated Sally. I think, in my opinion, because like you were saying that like every sentence something happens.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my feeling with Sally also before.
Interesting.
I was really overwhelmed with how much would always be happening, and then but then like the thing about Sally also is that like she does have those moments where she lets the story breathe. Yeah. But I don't think it's as much as like Chesil Beach, you know.
Yeah.
And, like, still in the sense that like. Even in those quiet moments of the book, it's usually for introspection of the character and it's them going through their shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I would say it's kind of like that.
Yeah, you certainly get that sense that I think introspection is not very explicit here, I think.
Oh yeah.
And in most of the cases, I think some of the biggest problems I had with like White Teeth as I was reading it was that there were certain moments where I felt like, wait, I I don't know if Zadie expects me to know this character's motivations already, or if I missed it because it was buried under so much detail. But that's sort of like, I guess, the quality of the prose that she keeps consistent, like, all throughout.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing is, like, coming out of this idea that James Wood called it, like, hysterical realism, interestingly enough, in 2001, in October, so this was, like, right after 9/11, like, the context is that James Wood, like, publishes another essay kind of saying, like, hey, maybe hysterical realism has to stop because clearly we're now at in the state of panic where feeling is more necessary than ever. And, like, you guys are not giving it to us. You guys are just, like, kind of gaping at the spectacle of the world, or of information, as it were. And in October, Zadie Smith wrote an article in The Guardian where she basically argued him on it. And she was saying, like, she basically rejected the claim that her novel qualified as hysterical realism. And she also, like, decried the idea that that there was any sense of feeling that was absent from her fiction. She made, like, this very point where, like, her writing is the only kind of work that she can produce, and that's coming from, like, this bigger knowledge of all the people that she tries to read and all the voices that she tries to encapsulate. So she went through this long, like, sort of laundry list of all the readers that she tries to read in the meantime, or all the writers that she's tried to grow up with. And you kind of get a sense of, like, oh, okay, that's the context of where she's coming from. And those are the voices who have most influenced her work. So I think on the basis of that, where she's somebody who definitely has grown up as a disciple of the Western canon. You almost can't blame her for writing the way that she did. Yes. Her writing is very much like the natural conclusion of all these many years of postmodern literature in the West building up to its point now in the 2000s. Which is something, again, that is no surprise because it's reflected in all these other works by all these other authors who were contemporaries, like David Foster Wallace. Don DeLillo is another one who gets mentioned. Now, the other thing that I wanted to mention to you, Mandy,
This is the second fact.
Yes, this is the second fact that I was setting up for, that I'm not sure if you saw, but White Teeth was actually adapted for a limited series. Yes, but did you...
okay, but I didn't see the cast.
You did not see the cast.
No, well, I just know. Was this BBC?
Yeah. Okay, actually I didn't check.
Oh, okay.
I didn't see who. It probably was, but I almost...
Most likely, though, right? Because they've only got like 2
I have like a 60% chance feeling that it was not BBC, but surely... No, I don't know.
Yeah.
They must have had some hand
BBC
on it.
or like Sky One, right?
Well, in any case, like, the names that I recognize the most, Clara Bowden was played by Naomi Harris, who 1,000,000% was the person who I imagined.
Really?
Yeah.
What year was this?
This was in 2002.
Okay.
And in fact, the whole thing is...
You know who I also imagined in it?
Who?
But I didn't know who. Maybe it's Clara. Fanny Newton?
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. She's not in it.
Oh.
No, but, like, yeah, this is in 2002. And then, like, okay, so it was Channel 4. I'm looking at it now. It's Channel 4. Naomi Harris played Clara Bowden.
Yeah, Channel 4 would do something like this, right?
And the whole thing's available on YouTube, by the way, if you want to watch it.
Oh, is it?
Now, here's the thing that you're going to lose your mind over. Guess who played...
Naomi Harris is from Islington?
But,
Sorry, I just Googled her.
Guess who
anyway,
played...
so guess who played who?
The character Josh Malfin, the son of the...
The son of...
The Malfin family, yeah. The son of Marcus and Joyce. Guess who plays Josh Malfin? It's
Matthew?
Nope, it is our good old friend, the right and honorable James McAvoy.
Are you serious?
If you look it up, you'll see like a picture of him as like a really young guy with like wiry glasses. But it's basically him.
Oh, maybe I've seen it, but I didn't know that.
You must have seen it. I feel like you have.
Yeah, that's so crazy. Okay, because like to be fair, from his like pre-Narnia career, I literally only know probably Shameless.
Yeah, this is surely in his pre-Narnia career.
Yeah. Wait, White Teeth, James McAvoy. I'm literally Googling.
The only other person here in the cast who I recognize, and it's the boss of Archie, who is not really in the
Oh!
is not really in the book or in I guess in the series at all, is John Sim. He plays the boss of Archibald Jones.
I do know what this is. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so you know.
That's so crazy. I'm totally gonna watch
Yeah,
that
so
now.
you can watch the whole thing. It's all
Oh,
on
but the
YouTube.
guy who plays Archie,
I don't recognize him. Who is he?
I'm pretty sure he was the taxi driver in Sherlock.
Right, okay, yeah.
Is that not him? That's him. I'm pretty sure that's him.
Now you're the one blowing my mind with contextual information. That is 100% the taxi driver from the first episode of Sherlock.
As soon as I saw him, I was like, I know that place.
That's so wild.
Russell Brand was in it.
Wait, was he? Okay, I missed that one also.
Merlin?
I don't even remember who Merlin is.
I know.
I feel like
Wait, I gotta know. Okay, so the person who plays Jolie, she's white. Gotta know.
Right, okay.
Well, yeah, we can Google it. Anyway,
you can watch it on YouTube, and I think with that, we've got enough context to kind of go into the discussion of what White Teeth is all about.
Yeah.
So, White Teeth broadly, I found this book weirdly hard to summarize. For the reasons we were saying earlier about hysterical fiction, there's so much going on, but because the focus of the book really shifts halfway through, and hilariously enough, it goes back to where it started by the end. So I almost was unsure, is this book really more about the generation of the English in circa World War II, or is it about the generation Generation X and going into the 90s and 2000s? Because the first half of the book is certainly about veterans, about World War II veterans, and kind of that culture of the greatest generation, thinking because we won the war, we're basically entitled to say how the world should be run because we defeated fascism. And they won't stop talking about that. Yeah. And that's, I think, something that's clearly reflected by the two representative characters from that generation. So you have Archie, Archibald Jones, and Samad Iqbal. And, it's something that gets explored towards the end of the first part. There are 4 parts of the book. At the end of part 1, they have a flashback to how they met during the war. And it's sort of this it's like a humorous turn of events. That in itself
deserves to be an
ironic turn of
events. I hope in the show that was a whole episode.
I feel like it is. The way the show does it is that they focus on one male character. I don't know why they focus only on the men, but then when the third part of the book is all about Irie, but then they separated the 3rd and 4th parts of the miniseries to Millet and Majid. But so so you have Archie and Sama. They met during the Second World War when they were in Italy, and through an ironic turn of events, they end up kind of missing the end of the war because they're in a jeep, and it's not even a combat jeep. It's sort of like a reconnaissance jeep that is supposed to build bridges and stuff. And then it breaks down, and then they kind of wander off, and then when they get back, everyone in their squad's been killed by a mysterious, assassin. So they go to the next nearby town, and they, kind of just settle there for a while. and
they just hang out.
And then, and then people and then eventually people who are passing through the town are like, oh yeah, the war ended.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they kind of
it's over, guys.
Yeah, they they're like, oh damn. And you can kind of see that for at least for Samad in particular, he had ambitions going into this war, and his whole character kind of hinges on this idea that he is descended from this soldier who was basically allegedly famous for starting the Great Indian Mutiny of, I think, 1857, was it? And he wanted to kind of follow in that legacy by also becoming a great warrior in the great Second World War, which he completely misses. So, and the worst part is that he doesn't even get into any, you never see him get into any big battles. The biggest injury he sustains is an accidental gunshot to his hand which leaves his left hand. It's
like paralyzed,
crippled on
basically.
one hand for like the entirety of his life, and it's sort of this like this burning reminder that he didn't really do anything in the war. So yeah, and it's while they're also in Italy, kind of just like waiting out the end of the war, that the village that they stumble into has this Nazi doctor that they end up having to like hunt down, and eventually like after some time they do that, and Samad and Archie have this like big discussion about legacy and history, which Archie doesn't really like. I feel like he's not really engaged in, partly because he's like I guess white and working class.
Yeah.
Where he's like, oh no, we're just kind of just here because we got nothing else to do, and they sent us here to do it, and we're supposed to get benefits or something. But good thing we survived. Whereas Samad's like, no, really, like you don't understand. Like for me, this is like everything that we have to kill this Nazi doctor, and you don't really see. But like Samad kind of charges Archie with the responsibility of executing the Nazi doctor,
and Archie basically drags him into like a deeper part of like they're like on a mountain, right?
Yeah.
And then you hear a gunshot.
And that's kind of it, at least as far as their war history is concerned. When the novel proper begins, I feel like it's so funny that we like jumped ahead to like the flashback to tell this story in chronological order.
I know.
But like when the novel like properly begins, like you see Archie and Samad have already like reintegrated into British society. Not very well, because when we first meet Archie, he's trying to kill himself. And even that goes wrong. And the reason that he tried to kill himself is that his first wife left him. So at that point he feels like, okay, I've achieved nothing. And then immediately after getting inadvertently saved by a neighboring like meat shop, he kind of celebrates life by going to this random party. Yeah, he goes to like a random party that is apparently celebrating the end of the world or something. And that's where he meets...
was it not New Year's?
Oh, sorry, yeah, New Year's, sorry.
Because it was New Year's.
No, but then the idea there is that the party was celebrating the end of the world, apparently. And that reason...
Because of the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, it's related to...
okay.
It's related to who he meets at the party, Clara Bowden, who is this 19-year-old Caribbean girl. And when the story kind of shifts over to her, you learn that she is the daughter of a family that is a Jehovah's Witness family. And they believe that the New Year's...
also from...
Right, they're immigrants
Jamaica.
from Jamaica. And when the story begins, the New Year that they're celebrating, according, for at least the Jehovah's Witness at the time, they were expecting that New Year's was going to be the end of the world. So you see, like, clearly the world hasn't ended, especially not for Archie, funny irony that is. And seeing Clara at that party, they end up like sort of flirting, and as you would expect, they get together, even though like Clara is like 19.
She's like 19 and Archie is like 40,
which is the sort of it's sort of the common characteristic in the two relationships with Archie and Clara and Samad and Alsana, because Samad is also married, but his wife is Alsana came to him through an arranged marriage, even before she was born.
Because doesn't he? Yeah, like because he says, because there's a bit where like Archie's like, I don't really have anyone waiting for like during the war. He said, I don't really have anyone waiting for me back home. And then Samad's like, I don't have that problem because I am in an arranged marriage. And he's like, oh, to who? And he's like, dunno, she ain't born yet. And you're just like, okay.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, slow down.
But like that's sort of where I started to see the shift like begin, because like I think the way the first part of the book is structured, it sets up like Archie and Samad as these people who have seen shit, like they've seen the crazy stuff. And, like, their wives, like, very early on, like, doubt that that's true. And it kind of, like, sows doubt within the reader as well to wonder whether or not they're actually heroes.
I was gonna say, there are moments here where you kind of forget that they were in the war.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's not even in the same way that where you're just like, oh, they're probably just repressing it because PTSD and like they, what do you call this? They didn't really talk about that kind of stuff before. But it's really just like, they're so unaffected.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they were the ones in it, but like nobody else who was there can speak to it anymore. Like even the first wife of Archie like ends up in an institute. She gets institutionalized. Yeah, so like there's no one else who can kind of attest to their legacy except
to them
them.
being like in the except each other.
But it's like the more that they talk about it, the more that you feel like this can't be
you're
real.
Like, what's this? Yeah, were you there?
And especially with like the age difference between them and their wives. It's also that kind of generational disconnect where it's like, oh, Clara and Alsana are really more boomers than they are greatest generation.
Yeah.
Diba?
Very true.
So you,
and then their kids are like Gen Y.
Yeah.
That's so crazy.
So it's like
one each.
Yeah, when I figured that out, like I didn't even reach that part where they had their kids yet. But when I figured out, like, oh, this is gonna be a huge generational novel, I was like, strap yourself in. This is gonna go places. And
that's so weird to think about. So that means they're Apo.
Yeah.
Is our age. Or millennials.
But
I just realized that.
But it's also funny because, like, at the same time, like, this fits into, like, a tradition of novels that I realized that was also, like, outside of the hysterical literature genre, there is also, like, an emerging trend that came out of, like, diaspora fiction. And they were all like multi-generational stories that were showing how
like Middle Club and stuff.
Yeah, or like Middlesex was the one I was thinking
of.
Like
that's right.
That's the one I think is like quite close to this because you start that off with the Greek
leaving the war.
Greek refugees escaping chaos. And then it kind of ends with like characters who are neither fully Greek nor fully American. But they're clearly in one place and not the other.
Yeah.
And at least as you see how Zadie Smith treats her characters here, part of her agenda for this is to really kind of interrogate that sense of hybridity. Like, is someone ever fully one or the other? Mm-hmm. And especially when the growing up in one place, you end up absorbing, ironically, the characteristics of the other, which you see later with like the son, the twins who end up becoming like polar opposites.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like early on, like you have that generational disconnect and the differences between the husbands and the wives and how that gets them into a lot of conflict. But yeah, like it eventually builds up into that revelatory flashback that, well, they didn't really do anything in the war.
Yeah.
And that is the legacy that their children will eventually supposedly inherit.
Yeah.
So that's the first part of the book. And then the second part, like, kind of like jumps forward.
I was gonna say, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
But like, that's another overarching, like, theme, I guess, is that they, it's always about the legacy.
Yes.
Right? But then, like, when you go to the perspectives of the kids, they're not thinking about the legacy much at all. They're thinking about what they can do now.
Yeah.
To change stuff, even if they're all extremists.
Which also like makes perfect sense given their age. Because you know, when you're older, like legacy is something that you look back on, but when you're younger, legacy is only something that you can only look forward to.
Right.
So for them, like it's natural that for them to think like there is a part like very late on in the book where you kind of get more introspection from Milat, and he's saying something, or like his thought process is like, well, my dad could only think of like what his ancestors did and how he has to live up to that.
Yes.
But I'm gonna think about
something similar.
Oh, did you? Yeah, but like but then like he ends up thinking like, but I'm gonna be the one who breaks that cycle. And naturally he can think that because he's at that age where like the opportunity to do so is most ripe.
Yeah, Clara naman, hers is similar in that she doesn't like that Archie's always talking about the war.
Yeah.
Because she just wants to talk about, like, right now.
Yeah.
And then it comes up again when she meets the family of Sina Josh. Because she's like, oh, these are what... this, and it's because it's a dad who's always thinking about the future.
Yeah.
So she's like, oh, that's what this is like. And then she also... I think it also comes up again when they're going into uni.
Yeah.
And she ends up being the first person in both sides of her family.
But you're talking about Irie.
Oh, sorry, I'm talking about Irie.
Yeah.
Sorry. I meant Irie, not Clara. I'm racist. I'm not. But like, yeah, I'm talking about Irie. That's what I was thinking. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, you were confused. Yeah. Sorry, just that.
When we get to the second part of the book, which takes place from Samad's perspective, like you already have the children are born, and I mean they haven't really like they're still in the process of like developing their characters, who they are, and even us as readers figuring out like what's gonna be the twist here. Are the children going to eventually grow up to fall into a love triangle?
Yeah.
And like the answer to that is yes and no.
Yes.
Like it complicates in very strange ways.
Yeah.
I think a testament to how much happens in this book is the fact that in the second part of the book, there's this whole subplot where Samad gets into an affair.
Yeah.
And I completely forgot about that.
No, because doesn't it just... I think that's one of the things that doesn't come back full circle also.
Right, because...
But like, not in a bad way. Right?
Yeah. Like, it's something that stays fully contained for all intents and purposes within the second part of the book.
Yeah.
Is that he gets into an affair with one of the teachers of the kids. Yeah, the music teacher. And it's
that's
just...
cool.
It almost feels like it's a platform for Zadie Smith to examine... like his
morality,
his sense of ethics, or like how that's supposedly guided by faith, because he's a
Yeah.
very devout Muslim, but
he's not good at the stuff.
it's one of those things where he's making so many technical concessions, and like he's trying to like get out of it by saying, well, I made this compromise with God, so surely God will let me off the hook in this regard.
Yeah, because he doesn't he like stop, like his thing was that, okay, when I get married, I'm not gonna, or like not even when I get married, but I'm not gonna masturbate for like 30 years. And that's what he does.
Yeah.
He like hasn't, and then he meets the teacher, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm clearly attracted to her.
Yeah, it's like, oh God,
I'm not gonna do anything, so I might as well just
like
masturbate now.
my life has led me this way, so
Yeah.
It's
and
like
then when
this
they
is
start having
fate.
the affair,
It's a test.
he's just like, well, I'm here now.
Yeah, like it's one of those things where,
Sorry.
like, you know, in a similar facet to what comes out of his legacy in the war, like it's him clearly failing to take responsibility over his actions, and kind of like blaming everyone else for all the misfortunes that happen,
and then making damay his kids, or like putting it on his kids,
right?
Because eventually that's what all these problems within himself, is what makes him decide to,
he ends up growing estranged from literally everyone by the end of the novel.
Yeah.
And like it doesn't take until the end of the novel for someone to like finally call him out on it. Which is also funny because like part of the estrangement that he has with these relationships is that he gets into these like very violent arguments with his wife where they go into the backyard and like physically fight. And she kicks his ass every single time.
I know. It's like, come on, Alsana, let's go.
but that happens, but that doesn't like change his mind or anything. And like kind of like the big thing that happens throughout that second book, which the affair kind of leads into, is that at some point while he's out with his mistress, the kids see him. The kids, all of them see them. All the three kids see him.
Ivy's also there.
Like they weren't they hanging out? Wasn't because the idea was
that's when they were trying to experience with a racist.
Yeah, they were going out. They were going out to meet a racist, and then when they were like kind of on their way home, they all like bumped into each other in the same path. And that kind of gives Samad the idea that he should send one of his kids back to Bangladesh. And like
a problem that's not there.
And like, which is also like a problem that doesn't really like it doesn't like come back in any meaningful way. Like nobody ever brings up the affair ever again.
And also, I'm pretty sure maybe those kids didn't even register what he was doing.
No, but okay, but
in the future he does. It's not like he has other affairs, right?
Right. No, that's right. In fairness to Samad, like I think his reasoning for deciding to send one of his kids back to Bangladesh is that to him he says like, wait, here in London, it doesn't even matter if I'm here or not, or if they see me doing good things or not. They're already affected by like the corruption of Western culture.
Of the English.
And so I need to send one of them back to be raised properly as I was. And like for the longest time, he's very wishy-washy on which child he's going to send back.
Yeah.
And then eventually he decides like, okay, I think I'm gonna send back Majid.
Yeah.
So okay, I think here it's like where we could talk about the twins a little bit. So Majid and Milat, at that point, they're already kind of like distinguishing.
Is it Majid or Majid?
I remember. So we both we both listened to the audiobook. I heard them say Majid.
Oh, okay. Majid. Okay.
Yeah, and then like they're at that point now when Samad makes that decision to send them away, one of them away. They're by that point developed that you see like, oh, okay, one is kind of studious, that's Majid, and then Milat
is like the troublemaker.
He's a troublemaker. He's kind of just like he doesn't really care about things.
Yeah.
Whereas like Majid's like into activism at an early age, and he and Irie are like hitting that off very well. Like that's their bonding point, is that they're both like protesting something, which like I mean like it had something to do with like a festival that the school was throwing, and Samad had like complained about it being like a pagan festival, but clearly everyone was like, ugh, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So he eventually decides like, I'm gonna send my industrious good child Majid back to Bangladesh because he is the pure child, and he's the child that like if he's grown in the right environment, he will turn out to be a great contributor to society. Which is again,
especially Muslim society.
Yeah,
like, he really is like he's gonna be a religious person.
Yeah, and that again, that's something that was not like immediately clear to me right away. And if you go back to the text, it doesn't even really say how he comes to the decision that Majid is the one that he'll send ultimately in the end. It just kind of says and then eventually it was Majid. And then she kind of like backtracks to explain later why he ultimately decided Majid was the one that he'd send back to Bangladesh, and Milat is the one who ends up staying in the UK. And the thing about that is that he makes this plan almost entirely on his own. The only person who he really tells about it is Archie, who becomes more of his like partner in life. Conspirator. But like they make this point also that Archie and Samad are really each other's last resort.
Yeah.
To the point like they don't spend New Year's anymore with their families. They spend it in their pool house O'Connell's. Together. But they don't spend it anymore with their families.
They don't talk to their wives, but they talk to each other
all the time. And they're just complaining about all these things. And then their history becomes entwined with the pool house where they spend most of their time. And Samad doesn't even tell his wife, he doesn't even tell Alsana that he's planning to send back one of their sons to Bangladesh.
Yeah, she finds out
after it. After the fact. And like to the point that
he remember the scene where they're going?
Yeah.
Archie almost fucks it up. Because he brings literally everyone.
Yeah, he brings Irie along also.
He brings Irie, and then also, what's his name? I know.
Oh, the three kids. The kids are all there. Yeah. But the other thing that I was thinking of, so I just remember now, there's a scene where Samad goes back home, and like, Alsana is like weeping, and he assumes that... Wait, sorry, I forget. He assumes that
is this when the
she's weeping?
Shit is happening now in Bangladesh?
No, sorry.
And she's...
Oh yeah, wait. Okay, now I'm confused because I thought that he was crying. She was crying because he assumed that she had found out either about the affair or about one of the sons leaving, and then he inadvertently reveals the other thing, whether it's the affair or the child leaving, and then they end up getting into a fight after that.
Again, No, but really, she was crying because she had heard on the news that riots were starting again. Yeah,
because Indira Gandhi had been assassinated.
Yes.
So she was scared about her family, like the violence that would, most certainly break out in the outpour, aftermath of that. And obviously that makes you kind of fearful for what will happen to the son who ends up getting sent to Bangladesh. But again, you have that sense that nothing ever really happens to him while he's there. He kind of grows up prosperously. And when,
like, does he go to private school?
So it's that, I really think it's that thing where, like, you know how sometimes, like, this is definitely an observation that you could see at least with like Filipino immigrants, but like, not all, but there are some Filipino immigrant families that when you see them abroad, like especially in the States or in the UK, where they seem like, okay, they're in kind of middle class, upper middle class jobs, but their family back home is a lot more, a lot better off than they are, because like.
Well, yeah, obviously, because...
Like with Majid, like, similar... It's very much the case, like, while the rest of, like the city that they're in is, like, being beset by floods and calamities, you know, their house is on a hill, so they're not really getting touched by the floods at all, or any of the earthquakes. And the most injury that Majid sustains while he's living in Bangladesh...
That was the vase.
Yeah, it was, like, a vase that fell on his nose while he was in a mosque, pa.
Yeah.
So, like... You know, nothing really happens to him that, like, the aftermath of that violence or the threat never really, like, comes upon him. And he ends up growing up into this, like, member of society.
Educated, very well-read kid.
Which is, like, quite ironic to Samad's expectations. Because he had sort of expected Majid to kind of become like a Samad do. Like, he wanted him to also become like sort of this devout Muslim who was like forwarding the achievements of the Bangladeshi people. But then what ends up happening is that he becomes like an atheist. He ends up like...
he likes science.
Yeah, like his mentor is the one writer that Samad doesn't like.
Yeah.
So for him, it was like an absolute mistake for me to send my son back to Bangladesh.
He literally was
which
like,
is
why?
So funny.
And then meanwhile, his brother...
Yeah, Milad.
Ends up being...
Yeah.
Like an extremist.
Yeah, he's devout, but in the wrong way.
In the wrong way. And he's just like, the fuck?
Yeah, where like when Milad is growing up, you know, like you have him like kind of leaning into the tendency to join with like gangs. Well, it seems like at first, and like, you know, he's like at an early age, like you see the first appearance of the extremist group that he joins, which is called Kevin. They appear as early as when they're in the school, Glenard Oak. But as he grows older, it's interesting.
High school, right?
Yeah, and as they grow older, you see that with Milat, he's wrestling with his faith in very compelling ways, because there's a part of him that kind of gets into it first because he feels like, yeah, okay, my cultural heritage is the one thing that differentiates me from everybody else, and because I'm so hated by my family, I need to seek validation from outside, so I'm going to own this immigrantness. Which, the funny thing about him is that the immigrantness that he kind of owns up to does not really like belong to him. Like, I forget what exactly, but he ends up like claiming like black culture as his own, like Caribbean culture as his own.
Yeah.
Or like he ends up also like, as he gets older, it morphs into him identifying mainly with gangster films and like Italian immigrants in the States. so like you see like he like really wrestles with that, and then when he tries to turn it around and go like back to, I guess, like his roots, which he identifies with Islam, like he's unsure about how to go with the ethics of being like a practicing Muslim.
Right.
Like he's able to stay away. Like at some point I remember there's a part in the book where it says like he's able to stay away from women, he's able to stay away from alcohol and all the earthly pleasures, but the one thing that he can't stay away from is gangster films. Like he can't give up Western culture. And to the point where like he's watching Goodfellas, and like the opening of Goodfellas is like, for all my life, I always wanted to be a gangster. And then, like, whenever he comes out of his house, he always tells himself, for as long as I can remember, I always wanted to be a Muslim. No, he always...
Muslim! Yeah.
So I was like, oh man, like, tough. This is tough shit, dude. like he can't give it up. And, like, that kind of, like, influences him to, I guess, in some part, join Kevin, even though you can tell he's not fully on board with all the things that Kevin is teaching. Even to the point that like the leaders of Kevin, like they give him pamphlets on how to pray, and you can see him. He's like actively trying to like enact it, but he can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He never gets into it.
yeah. So it's that disparity of like him trying to find like he's at a loss. He's very much at a loss for what he's supposed to hold on to and latch onto because he feels like they name him the second son. They keep calling him the second son because he was born
like a minute later.
Yeah, as compared to his twin, right?
Yeah,
and I think that kind of like is embedded into his identity basically.
Yeah.
Apart from the twins, the only other character who like really gets like a lot of major development in that section of the book is Irie, who is the daughter of Archie and Clara. And like her whole thing, she basically, her story takes up the third part of the book.
Yeah.
And like her whole thing is that
she's in love with.
Yeah, she's in love with Milat. Yeah. But like at the early age, it seemed like she was closer to Majid. But then when Majid was moved away, she had
to get closer to it.
Yeah, she kind of brushed off her closeness with Majid as a childhood thing. Yeah. Like, hey, okay, I'm older now. I can go for more mature things. And for her, the more mature thing was Milat. But it's in her section of the book that it also starts to examine this kind of like invasive ideology that comes into their life. Because after Irie, Milat, and this other boy at school, Joshua, played by James McAvoy, get inadvertently busted for holding a joint, for possessing a joint,
on campus.
That they're made to like do study breaks essentially. It's like Community, but then they do it in,
but worse.
Yeah, but worse. It's like it's like dystopian Community, and they basically spend it in the household of Joshua's family, the Chalfans. Mm-hmm. And like the Chalfans, the thing about them as a family is like how would you describe? Yeah, I think they're Jewish. I believe they're Jewish.
They're upper middle class Jewish, right? And they're very white.
Yeah, I would say they're aggressively white.
They're aggressively white. Yeah, because like their whole thing was that like they like the mom is always like, we're like a really perfect family.
Yeah, and like her whole thing is like she's like a horticulturist. So like when they they're also scientists. Yeah, like when they introduce,
so they're also inadvertently atheists.
Yeah, when they introduce the mom's character Joyce, they introduce it with an excerpt from her book where she tries to equate the sexual revolution to the life cycle of flowers, to the reproductive cycle of flowers. And it's like, oh man.
Lady. Oh lady.
And like for her, like she kind of like tries to invest that metaphor of like gardening or plant care into like every aspect of her life, to the point that when Milat and Irie enter their household, she sees them as like, oh, this is my next big pet project. Yeah, like I have to like grow these kids into good members of society. Yeah, like she takes that as her responsibility. And to the point that she kind of like ends up like ignoring all her other responsibilities, most especially like her role as the mother to Joshua. Like that's sort of like this underlying thing is that while she's getting closer to Milat and Irie, she's also like becoming estranged from Joshua, and Joshua ends up acting out because of that.
Yeah. And it's also because she's like, their whole thing is that, we raised them to be so self-sufficient.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But like she has that whole thing where she complains that when they stop breastfeeding,
right?
Like, they're grown up,
right? Which like I wanna hear what you think about this, because it feels like there's a very insightful. I don't know if it's a jab or if it's just an observation, but like this way of looking at, I guess, like sort of white middle classness.
Feminism.
Which is definitely like something that is a very specific offshoot of that. But like you see it very well, like the way that Joyce sees their family as perfect in every way. Like Marcus clearly also holds that view, even though he doesn't express it as much. He's someone who's like,
or like he doesn't even work for it as
because
hard as she does.
He's devoted to his work.
Yeah.
So he doesn't like really put himself into his family. In many ways, they're very much like the sorry. Whoa.
It's okay.
I don't even know if I'm gonna like cut that up, but like in many ways, they're like very much the middle class, like white family dream, or like the white ideal. I almost want to say like especially the American,
like Irie.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah,
like I said earlier, when she first meets them, she's like, "Oh,
like this is
it's like you do not have to worry about anything."
Yeah. Which is also really sad because, like, you know, you read it now, you're like, no, there are so many things that they
there's
cannot
so many.
catch.
Yeah, like this dad is clearly very like absent.
Yeah,
he probably these parents don't know their kids at all.
At all.
They were also essentially being like, you know, they had the savior complex.
Yes, exactly.
In different ways, and especially, you know, again with with Joyce thinking that like Sina, you know, Melato were like her projects, quote unquote projects.
Right.
It's like she thinks it's her doing something genuine for society, but really, you know, contextually, it's not. It's her being like super racist.
Yeah, exactly. And that sort of made me wonder because like the way I was sort of thinking of it is that, okay, I think Zadie Smith is using the Chalfin family, or Chalfinism, she even gives it a name, their ideology of their way of life, as a way of representing kind of the limitation or the end of white advancement. Or I don't know, there's no good word for it, but like the end of like white, like no, wait, hear me out, hear me out, because it's like the premise here is that, okay, the white people.
The whites? Just say the whites.
Western white culture has like dominated discourse and progress for so many centuries that like for them to like progress any further would be to end up like refuting or destroying what the previous generations had set up, right? Mm-hmm. Which is kind of like the premise of what's being set up with Marcus's character, where like his desire to genetically engineer a mouse through cloning and essentially eugenics will like destroy like all the earlier generations of like religious colonization. Or like empire, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. Like for him, like his individual advancement is supposed to supersede
racism,
or the legacy that his quote unquote like ancestry had built.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Yeah, and it's like, dude, just admit y'all were racist.
Yeah, or like admit like other people can like take the spotlight for once, that they have good ideas and it's not just
like
you.
The fact that he was like, no, I have to fix this.
Or for that matter with Joyce, like not to see them as your project, like these like sure,
they're just
these kids need help in some regard, but not in the way that you think they need it. Like you know, like if anyone needs it,
like
it's your
both of
son.
them clearly saw these families as just parts of the machine.
Right.
I had no other way to say it. Like, parang they were to be used in some way or other for their own like you know, interior benefit, whether they wanted to address it or not.
But like that's something that it's so close to the children, to Irie in particular, that she, like as you're saying, she sees it as something appealing, and she doesn't really see the flaws of it until much later, when, like, amazingly, Majid starts to get reintroduced into the picture in a pretty insane way. Where, like, so...
Majid's coming home.
Yeah.
Coming home.
He ends up...
I still don't know that song, by the way.
It's the football song.
Okay. I only know it because of you.
Yeah. So, Majid, he ends up... beginning a correspondence with Marcus, the dad of the Chalfin family. And Marcus kind of sees in him like a kindred spirit. Like, this is a guy who's talking my language. Like, he knows what it is that I'm trying to do that all these other scientists have shunned. And like, in his eyes, because Majid wants to practice law, for him, it's like, okay, if I get someone as brilliant as Majid to defend me in court, then I will be able to achieve my life's greatest work. And he kind of takes on Majid as an apprentice, which Irie resents because she wanted to be the apprentice of Marcus.
And then she snoops their like letters.
Yeah.
And she gets more disheartened when she finds out that Marcus doesn't even think that she'd be good at science.
Yeah, like she gets relegated essentially to the secretary role.
Yeah.
In Marcus's like personal office, as it were.
Yes.
So like for her, that's the point of her disillusion, where she realizes, I feel like my roots are not really here. And I say roots very strategically because we haven't even addressed the teeth motif of this whole novel, which, I mean, like, I'm not a dentist, but like, like there were many very clear references to teeth apart from the title, where it kind of referenced all these sort of, not really traumatic,
when
but
the racist,
they
had their first racist experience, right?
Yeah. Well, there's
thing about brushing teeth.
He had a thing about brushing teeth.
Affair. The lady who Samad had the affair with.
But also, like, even in the chaptering, the titles there's a recurring chapter title, which is the root canal of an uncertain character.
Yes, that's
and
true.
It kind of like refers to like the specific events in their life that like change the direction.
Mm-hmm.
So like for Archie and Samad, their root canal was that flashback to the war. Basically what they went through in the war, or what they didn't go through in the war, was their root canal. And then there was like a brief root canal segment for like the great grandmother of Irie, where when she had given birth in Jamaica during an earthquake, while she was trying to fight off a rapist.
Yeah.
And that sort of turned her, like, as I'm describing it.
And the rapist was the guy who
started the school.
Yeah.
I feel like a crazy person talking about these relations.
This whole story, I was gonna say, this whole story is just the meme from, what do you call that?
Yeah. From Sunny in Philadelphia.
Yes, that one where it's just, what's his name?
Like, Charlie Day.
Charlie Day being like, okay guys, that's gonna be us.
Yeah. So, I almost, like, you see these root canals are sort of like, suggesting like, their roots are being moved around, and especially with the idea of Majid being uprooted in his own way, and, Milat not being uprooted even though he's seen as the rotten tooth of the family. Like, you see she's very playful with these metaphors, which, I almost wish I was like a dentist, or I read more about dentistry so that I could really follow or really track this metaphor. Yeah, who did she talk to?
Or did she just have like a really extensive root canal? Yeah. That she was like, okay.
Yeah, like, I gotta ask about this. Like, I have to ask these questions because, in Cambridge, who's her dentist? If you
speak up, if
you are dentist, Cambridge dentist, give us we'd love to have you on the podcast.
I just want to know.
Yeah. So all these things about roots, all these things about the Chalfens, that basically builds up into, like, okay, the fourth part of the novel, like the last part of the novel, the way it kind of unravels is. Okay, so one thing I will say about the fourth part of the novel is I was like amazed with how she ended the book. I'm gonna start from there because the way the book starts pulling up to its end, it builds up this event, which is that, okay, Majid returns to the UK, and he seals the deal as the apprentice of Marcus, and Marcus ends up completing his project to engineer the future mouse, as he calls it. And there's going to be this big event where they're going to exhibit the future mouse for like 7 years. And it's in 1992, and it'll be there until the millennium on New Year's Eve, 1999. So it's specifically engineered so that's the entire mouse's lifespan. And on the peripheries, you have all these groups.
The great-grandparents?
Or is
this in this part also?
No. Well, we kind of briefly mentioned them. Oh, wait. No, sorry. You're right. You're right.
Like you're right. Actual Lola.
Oh, that's right. You're right. Yeah, because on the peripheries.
Because that also plays into like that, the fact that it's 1999.
Right. Because part of the periphery, you have Kevin. They decide like, okay, this guy is like clearly offending the laws of God by playing God, so we have to put a stop to him. And then you have two other groups that like come out of the woodwork to also oppose the future mouse
Yeah.
event. And on one hand, you have what's the group's called Fate. I forgot what but they're supposed to be like PETA. And what happens is that Joshua,
Not the theater.
not the theater for our Filipino listeners, but the other one. And then you see that Joshua's character, after becoming estranged with the Chalfin family, he ends up turning to the group Fate. And they decide, like, you know, what they're doing to that mouse is unethical. We have to put a stop to it because the way we treat animals is just really unethical. So you have that. And then the third side that's coming up out of the woodwork is Jehovah's Witness, because like halfway through part 3, Irie decides, like, I've had enough with like my mom and my dad. Like Irie like discovers that Clara at some point has had her teeth replaced, because for the longest time she had like bad teeth. And then at one point in the night, when she tries to convince her mom to let her do like a year off abroad so that she can do volunteer work, she discovers that her mom now has false teeth. And that was another part where I felt like I didn't really track what was going on or why she was disappointed. But it somehow had something to do with like her,
like lies and stuff.
Yeah, like feeling like her mother
because
had lied to her all her life.
Because she felt like she was always having to discover things about their family.
Right.
In the weirdest ways.
So she ends up going back to her grandmother, Hortense. One thing that we kind of neglected to mention from the first part is that when Clara's character is introduced, the reason that she ends up at the party is that, so her mom had been like part of the group that was predicting, like, okay, this night in 1974 is going to be the night when the world will end, and you know, all of us Jehovah's Witnesses will be called to the kingdom of heaven. And the thing for Clara is that when she was growing up, she ended up going to a Catholic school where she was shunned because she was a Jehovah's Witness. And the only other boy who was shunned, not because he was a Jehovah's Witness, but because everyone liked to pick on him, was this boy, Ryan Tops, who she started like inviting to her house more often. And then, like, much to Clara's chagrin, like, what ends up happening is that Ryan Tops ends up becoming a Jehovah's Witness. He gets converted. He becomes a Jehovah's Witness. And then, when Irie comes back in part 3, it's revealed that after she
had run away with Archie.
After Clara's dad essentially dies and passes away, Hortense, the grandma of Irie, ends up getting together with Ryan Tops.
Yeah, and they literally have essentially been living together this entire time. And he's been so converted. He converted so hard.
Yeah.
That he essentially tells Irie, you know, I don't actually remember your mother. Like, what the hell? and like, also the funny thing is that like, wasn't Hortense kind of old now when she had Irie?
Yeah,
she was like 35.
Yeah,
and then Ryan and Clara are supposed to be the same age.
Yes, exactly.
So there's that whole thing.
Generational. That's stuff. Right, and then history repeating itself. Yeah.
Yeah, so parang their whole thing. Okay, so there's so many layers to this. It's driving me nuts.
Again, like, Charlie Day.
Yeah, I'm very Charlie Day right now. So in the beginning, before she meets, or when she has already met Ryan, see Mama Hortense is like, okay, let's just convert this white boy. It's gonna be fine. By the way, your dad, we hate him. And she's like, you're right. Because like, his whole character was that he immigrated to the UK, discovered television, and just never left.
Yeah. And like even to the point that like after he's died, like the television's still kind of on, almost implying that his ghost is watching it.
Yeah. Like that's freaking. Anyway, so there's that.
Yeah.
And then, so she's very religious. The grandma is still very religious. And then she tries to, you know, Clara is raised in the faith, but like she is so half and half about it. So she's one of those boomers that like is kind of wishy-washy about it. Like she is for being liberal, but then also still gets drawn back to like those sensibilities.
Right.
But then like her peak of rebellion is when she marries Archie, Because not only is she marrying somebody older and also marrying somebody who she knows will take her away from her crazy mother, he's white.
Yeah.
And like essentially this is the crazy thing din eh. Hortense doesn't care that he's not even a Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah.
She cares that he's white.
Yeah.
Which she should. That's scarier than not being of the same religion.
Right, because when it goes back to Hortense's mom in Jamaica, and then you see that she was almost raped by a white guy, but then she was also impregnated by a white guy.
Yes.
All of them were like English lords who were like ruling over the colony in Jamaica.
They had haciendas.
Yeah, like for her, it's like, no, this is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
Like, this
no,
is
and
hell
then
on
also,
earth.
because I think she makes this point, or I don't know if it's her or the narrator, it makes this point na parang, if she gets married to a white person, that's going to start a cycle, and then by the time it reaches like 5th gen,
She won't be black. Yeah, that's right.
Right. So parang there's that. But then also, it's like she gets with Ryan anyway.
Yeah.
So what's the truth?
And like
Lola!
it's so funny also because like Ryan's like understanding of faith is not very complex either. Like it's
very shallow.
It's not as deep as Milat. Like the way he expresses it is like it's basically Star Wars. Like it's good, evil, magic. That's it.
And it's also very it's very what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
Like if he read it or if he heard it from a phone call from one of their like what do you call this, leaders from America, then he'll believe it, right?
Yeah.
Because isn't that the whole thing? So going back into the event, when the Jehovah's Witnesses get involved, it's because they get a call from some dude in Brooklyn.
Yeah, their New York office.
The New York
being like, okay, stop the process.
The New York branch.
We figured it out.
Jehovah's Witnesses.
We've got the date, and the date of the end of the world is
this.
New Year's Eve. Basically New Year's Eve, 1999. Yeah. So
that's how they get involved. They're like, we're gonna go to this event. We're gonna not even really protest. They're just there to sing it out. Right?
I have to say this is the part where Zadie Smith's fiction like moves closest to like David Foster Wallace, because like in Infinite Jest, he also has like a similar thing where like forces are converging. Forces are converging to steal the film Infinite Jest. But then they're all like forces who depend on like these increasingly idiosyncratic and eccentric ideologies. Like there are these like assassins who like they basically get around by pretending that they're all disabled, or they are all disabled, but that becomes their like advantage because nobody would suspect a disabled person of like being an assassin essentially. It's the point where I felt like she's like really moving away from what I thought would be like the core emotions. But then she brings it around in a very surprising way, and as I said,
crazy way.
Let's describe what happens. It basically, the night of the event, all the forces are converging upon the future mouse event, including the families. There's this quick, poignant scene on the bus where they all clearly hate each other already. Like it's the two husbands, Archie and Sama, the two wives, Clara and Alsana, Irie's there, and then their other relative Nina, who's always been like this more like liberal, westernized
she's gay.
cousin. Yeah, she's gay. And then what happens is that Archie like ends up like kind of musing about like the world. Like there's this really sweet running thread throughout the whole book where he has a pen pal who was like his former competitor in like the Olympics for like indoor running. Was it indoor running? And then like that guy has not stopped.
Very telling.
Yeah, is a guy who has not stopped writing to him for almost 50 years now. Just so sweet.
But then like you also think, where was this dude?
Yeah, but like this guy, he ends up like writing this very poignant letter about like, oh, I took care of my pets today, like my cats, or was it dogs? But like he like taking care of some animals, and it made him like feel like, oh, okay, I really grew into my age. And then Archie starts wondering like, oh, isn't it weird that bus tickets have all this information on them? Like it's very mundane stuff. And then Samad like gets mad at him which is like the last straw because he's now finally getting mad at his best friend in the world. And, and Irie,
at that point, essentially the only person who's still talking to him.
Yeah, and Irie calls him out on it, like, you know, like all these like pent up anger that she's held ever since she met the child fans, ever since, you know, all these things that happen, like all the things that other families worry about, we only worry about history, which I viewed as Zadie, like, kind of like talking on the whole about how, like, I don't know if this is
diaspora,
diaspora, or like even I would say
diaspora,
like our families here, like, are, like, in general, like in the Philippines, like you see a lot of Filipino families who are like very insistent on this idea of holding grudges or on the history of like our ancestors living up to that, and
but also we have a very casual practice of it as well.
Yeah,
like in utang na loob.
Yeah, basically,
because that, which basically means like the debt that you have inside to other people, and that extends as much to your like ancestry, but also so much as like, for example, Mio, if you lent me like 20 pesos, which I don't know why I need 20 pesos, but like, okay, let's say you lent me like 100 pesos for something.
In like the
I not only have like actual utang.
In the hysterical realist mode, that we could do something like, I would owe you 20 pesos and then buy some like miracle of like inflation down the line.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you know, and then turns out that 20 pesos was like something that I really needed to survive the day. I wouldn't just owe you money. I would also owe you like for that.
Or like
helping
like the 20 pesos, turned out that the 20 peso bill that you gave me was a rare bill where they had misprinted, instead of Manuel Luis Quezon's face, like, it was like Bonifacio's face was printed on the 20 peso bill. And so that bill ended up becoming worth $1 million pesos.
Like
so then you would claim
pesos.
that I would owe you $1 million+ pesos. Yeah, that's how hysterical realists would write it.
That's how it would go. And then the way we find out that it's Andres Bonifacio is that we have to culminate at an event like maybe it's it's a revolution anniversary or something. We'll decide to like wave around 20s. And then when I look at my 20, I'm like,
or like someone decides like we're gonna tear 20 peso bills like cedulas. like tearing of the cedula.
And then as I'm holding my 20 into the sun, I realize, holy shit, this isn't Quezon.
And then that's when you see that the face of Bonifacio gets torn, and you're like, no!
Yeah! This is, I can't believe. So we just wrote tangent fic.
Yeah, we write fics on this podcast. Find us on AO3.
Yeah, you can. I actually don't.
We'll see. It depends. Stay tuned.
Yeah, find out.
Okay.
Anyway, so we're just trying to tell you that our people also hold grudges.
It's something that I think speaks largely also to like this whole idea of what's happening in the novel of Eastern culture or Eastern values versus Western values, where like this idea of rationalism and intellect kind of like clashing with like I guess like sort of bonds of the heart, as it were. Like you can see that one clearly values one of those values more than the other, and the other is the extreme of the other side. So you have all these things that are clashing, and that all comes to a front at the Future Mouse event, where, as we said, like everyone is gathered, and Archie and Samad are there, and basically the way the whole last chapter of the book plays out, I really got nervous. I didn't know if she was gonna pull it off. And as I was saying to you after we finished reading the book, I can't believe I'm gonna say this again. I'm so glad they brought the Nazi back. I'm so glad the Nazi actually came back.
This is the only time you can say that sentence.
Because it's revealed.
And it will make sense.
Because it's revealed at the Future Mouse event that Marcus's mentor this whole time.
And who he's been referencing, right?
Yeah. Has he they kept saying like the Pere Institute, which like again, like I tried to track like, wait a minute. There's no way that they named that guy in the earlier part, was it? But it's anyway, like long story short, it's revealed that he's the same Nazi doctor that Samad tried to make Archie kill. And it goes back into a flashback where it explains that Archie never killed the Nazi doctor. He kind of just like accidentally let him go, and the Nazi doctor tried to kill him, which explains why there's like a piece of shrapnel in Archie's leg, which he's been holding all these years, but has been unexplained.
Yeah.
But basically, the Nazi doctor and Archie have this sort of debate again about legacy, and you would get the sense that, oh, he's having the debate with the wrong character, because Archie's the one who doesn't really think about legacy all that much. But that's kind of the appeal that he makes to Archie to let him go. And the thing that ultimately makes Archie let him go is like this sort of realization, like, well, what's it for if I do this act of violence? Like, the war is over. We're not really fighting anymore. And if I kill you, you'll be the only person that I've killed. And like, that's kind of it. And he...
Yeah, but he was a Nazi!
But wait. But the thing that he leaves it to, that he gives it responsibility to, is he leaves it to a coin toss, which he never really...
But then, like, he does that across the book.
Right, no,
that's how he decides shit.
That's sort of, like, been reinforcing this idea that he, like Samad, is someone who doesn't take responsibility or doesn't see any responsibility in his actions. He would rather leave it to a coin toss so that he can wash his hands of the weight of his action.
Sabi ng coin.
Right, so... in the same way, he was about to do that for this Nazi doctor, but the coin like kind of falls to the side, so he never sees the outcome, and that's when the Nazi doctor tries to shoot him. And then it cuts back to the present, where Milat, in an attempt to like take on some like extremist action by either killing Marcus or killing the mouse or killing someone, he ends up trying to like shoot the Nazi doctor. And then Archie kind of just jumps in front of him. And, I forget. I forget if this was in the book, but I definitely 100% saw it in the series, in the miniseries.
Mm-hmm. Sorry. Did you watch the whole thing?
I watched, like, certain portions, but in the miniseries, the thing that stops Archie from dying when he gets shot...
is the shrapnel?
No. Actually, no. Is that there is a coin in his pocket.
Oh my god! Ang galing!
Which, like, I'm just gonna accept that as the canonical reason that he doesn't die.
I like that.
In that moment, because, like, wow, like, what a way to seal the idea of what goes around comes around.
Yeah.
Which was amazing. And then the book kind of, like, goes on to outline, like, how all of them sort of move on from that, where Majid and Milat, being identical twins, are both suspected of the attempted assault. But
I was gonna say also, we forgot to mention.
Oh, what? What did we miss?
In terms of, people who have to figure out who between the twins did a thing.
Right. Oh, sorry. Okay. Wait. No, I'll get there because there's a part where we're gonna say what happened to Irie. But like for Milat and Majid, what basically happens to them is they both get accused of trying to shoot the Nazi doctor because they're identical twins, of course.
Mm-hmm. And everyone's a racist.
Yeah, everyone's a racist. So they both end up getting arrested and having to send community service, which
ends up being
like helping Joyce build her new public garden.
Yeah.
And
community. So the white community.
Yeah, again. Wasn't the community all the real friends we made along the way?
Alright,
but then
the community is all the white teeth.
So after Majid and Milat, it also shows what happens to Irie, where Irie ends up with Josh, surprisingly.
With Josh, yep.
Boy. And it's revealed that she has a child. Although it was revealed earlier that she was pregnant. The mystery was about who the pregnancy belonged to. Because earlier on, before leading up to the event, she slept with
both of them.
Both of them, right? And she couldn't figure out whose it was, but because they are twins, it might.
But to be fair, how could she figure it out? Because she slept with him within 20 minutes of each other.
Exactly. No, that's right. And it's like one of those tricky things where it's like, yeah, of course she can't tell because they also have the same DNA. So the paternity test would always come out the same. So for all she cares, it's basically both of them, but also neither. It's Schrodinger's baby.
Yeah.
And she basically ends up in Jamaica, having moved there with Hortense. to do the sort of work outside of the UK that she really wanted to do, and her child is very nice. And
her child refers to the twins as like uncle.
Yeah, so neither of them are really her father. And then as for the parents themselves, the only thing that's sort of offered up as a resolution for them is that at some point O'Connell's, which had previously been exclusively all male, finally opens its doors so that Clara and Alsana can finally go into the pool house.
Yeah, hang out.
And I think we also slipped past like how this future is presented, because the way the book ends doesn't end with that epilogue kind of like showing their futures. The fates of the characters precedes what actually happens in the end. Like she kind of like has an interlude and says, okay, before I tell you what happens in the end, this is what happened to everyone. And then she does like the quick run through of how everyone turned out. And then she goes back to the scene.
It's basically like, and that's how you miss on Glee.
Yeah. Or that's what you will miss on Glee. But
oh, yeah. That's true.
But she goes back to the scene where Archie gets shot by Millat. And the way the book ends is that as Archie is getting shot, he sees the mouse.
Was looking at the mouse.
Yeah, escaping. And he says, let go, my son. You know, as it goes into the future. Right. Which, like, I realized, like, oh, no, yeah, that tracks. Because then it's also, like, embedding the metaphor of, I guess, like, the engineered new British generation into the mouse. In the sense that, okay, the British Empire took such effort to engineer this perfect version of the descendant that they've also engineered the diseases into like the millennials now. Like we're now everyone's like basically living with this the cancers that will eventually kill the mice within 7 years, which I guess is, good way of ending it off.
Yeah, fuck you, white people.
Woo! So white teeth, white people, and Zadie Smith, very good.
Yeah, insane in the membrane.
Yeah, I again,
insane.
Again, like I kind of wish I'd read this book earlier, because I feel like
or like if we had more time,
No, well, okay, no time.
Is that what you meant?
No, we definitely had more time. I mean, earlier in my life, like I wish I read this in college when I was experiencing all the other books.
Personally, I think I would have not been ready for it.
That's fair. I
think you would have really...
I really got surprised by how much I'd missed. Okay, like, I'll put it this way. Like, last year, I finally filled in another blind spot in, like, my cultural knowledge and watched all the Hayao Miyazaki movies, with Blank Check, with Griffin and David. And it was one of those things where once I'd seen all of them, I finally, like, said to myself, like, where have I been all my life that I've missed out on this? And I had the same feeling as I was reading this book, where I really went like, how did I never pick this up? Like, how did I completely miss out on reading this fantastic book? Because no surprise, I really loved it.
Yeah. It's so good. I think it's safe to say that you never really read anything like her.
Yeah, which...
I mean, like, you mentioned...
Well, I think that's why I wonder if I would have enjoyed reading this book as well in college, because like I was also experiencing Infinite Jest as well in college. Like I would have probably jived with that. But no, I really, it's one of those things, man.
It truly.
Yeah. Which again becomes a surprise, because knowing what we know of how her writing will turn out, not that it necessarily becomes bad, but it doesn't look like this at all in Swing Time. Anymore, I feel like in Swing Time, it's a very different thing that she's doing.
She always goes through the same themes, but then her style is definitely...
And to be fair, like, okay, changing. Like, the next book that we're going to read after this, The Autograph Man, I don't know if you started on it, but even in that one, the style is already starting to change. And I don't know if it's something that's a response to this identification of hysterical literature as a trend, or if it's something that was always in her. But I understand that there were also different factors that led to the writing of that book, which obviously we'll get into in the next episode. But yeah, for now, like, this is like already, for me, if I were in the year 2000 reading this as an adult and like being like, whoa, a new like challenger has emerged in the scene, like all hail Zadie Smith, I would have really like gone that way.
Yeah.
I really would have reacted that way.
Sorry, my nose is really like, go ahead.
Oh, that's good. Are you okay?
My allergy just suddenly existed in my body. I'm just gonna put some cutting go on. Anyway, go on.
Right, well, I guess we should move on to wrapping up this episode. So, with our evaluation system, required, recommended, or non-required, I would definitely say this book is required as hell. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how do you not read this?
Yeah.
How do you like avoid putting this into any curriculum that's about like contemporary British fiction or contemporary fiction in general?
Very true. And that was also something when you mentioned then that you want to talk about like putting it into lists.
Yeah.
Which we'll get to. I realized then like, oh no, why didn't we? Can I just say, okay, just going back to Swing Time also.
Okay.
And because Swing Time was the first I had heard of her, and because she looks great, she looks amazing. Mm-hmm. I did not think that her debut was 2001.
Yeah.
Like, I literally thought that she had debuted later, like 2007 or like 2000. And then she was like whatever age she was in 2001. Like, I had no idea that she had been around for so long and that this first novel of hers was so impactful already as it was.
Yeah.
And like, it really did shock me that, you know, no one has ever brought it up in like any of our classes. But at the same time, it's like, okay, does it have to do with her being a woman and also brown? Like,
or like, I guess like, at least in terms of the classes that we sat through, was it also something to do with the newness of her work?
The genre?
Or like, cause like, okay, like, at least in our classes, like, we never even talked about David Foster Wallace or Don DeLillo.
I'm so sorry.
But like, those were like writers who I also discovered on my own, as it were.
Yeah, but then also at the same time, it's like, I feel like the newest, or like the most uso, quote-unquote, writer that we had talked about, I don't know about you because you're 2 years ahead of me.
Yeah.
But like, would have to be maybe, oh my god, I'm blanking. Murakami?
Really? Okay, well, yeah, I guess in a weird way, yeah.
In terms of like usoness.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I can see how that would be the case, at least in the context
in
of our
university.
Context, yeah.
Whereas I know that in other universities, they're more open to...
Yeah, like, sure.
Because I know people who have read... Like, my cousin read Infinite Jest for class.
Right. Oh, what the hell?
Yeah. Dude, in Ateneo... Sorry, just naming names now. But, like, she... Because I remember when she was a freshman, she was like, hey, can you look at my syllabus for this philo class and tell me what you can help me with?
What was the philo class?
Yeah, dude. And then one of their readings was, like, 3 chapters.
It must be like the philosophy of, like, media or something. Because so much of that book is about media. Media ethics. I'm
actually not sure because she's not a media student. This was when she was not in majors yet. She's a business grad. Anyway, crazy stuff. So whereas with us, we read a lot of Leo classics, as we mentioned.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, required. This book is
required for both of us.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, and I guess that's it for us on this episode. Is there anything you want to leave the note on?
Pod with?
How are you doing? I never asked you this on the episodes, but I almost I feel like
now
I should
talk about.
Yeah, we should talk about each other. Like our last.
We should talk about each other.
Yeah, like our last episode was quite nice because if you guys missed it, our reading break episode was a completely non-reading episode. Mm-hmm. We just asked each other questions and talked about not really life, but like the opening is there. We could basically talk about life. Mm-hmm. How are you doing?
We could have. I'm good. I'm really tired, but not because of this. You know, this was my break for the day.
We're not recording this at our usual hours of what is it again? 11 to 2 a.m.
I saw the sun set.
We're recording this at a more godly hour, as it were. I should be having dinner soon, but
I should make dinner. Jesus Christ! But like, no, I'm doing good. How are you? How was today? You did dinner today.
I'm so bushed. I'm ready to throw in the towel tonight.
Hells yeah.
But you know,
yeah.
I did a lot today. I think I did a lot today.
That's good.
I did some work, and then I did some personal work.
Mm-hmm.
Like most of my work, I mean, like for the listeners who don't know me, I don't really. I'm more of I'm in the gig economy. I'm a freelance worker, so
project to project.
so like
you
know, I have to make my own schedule, and like I started out with like business work, and then I did personal work after.
Yeah.
So
good for you, buddy. Good for you.
yeah, I felt like I did a lot today. The dogs were just driving me crazy. That is all.
Oh Jesus. I'm glad that we can take a break now.
And
thank you also to Zadie Smith for
for this great book. Wow.
Yes,
this amazing book. I can't wait to see how things turn out with the autograph man, which I'm now starting.
I know. Okay, let's say it here. Let's say what you're, of all the ones that we're gonna read, what are you most excited for?
So
now knowing what we know,
definitely the middle books. There are two middle books: the NW and On Beauty.
Same.
Which
oh my god, siblings.
yeah. Well, okay.
I was gonna say NW. I'm super pumped for.
Like the thing is like so, like White Teeth. I always knew was like her most well-known work. Right. But there's also quality to NW and On Beauty that I'm also really excited for her short stories, her short story collection Grand Union. But
yes, me too,
okay, so three things. So three things. So the thing with NW is I started reading it. For some reason I didn't finish it, but I remember thinking it was good, so I don't know why I put it down. And it's in that one that you also see her experimenting with different forms. So like that's a book where she has like a whole portion of the book that's just like written like a screenplay, or like one that's written in actual like stream of consciousness, which is like a huge turn away again from here, which is like not really stream of consciousness at all, but it's very comprehensive. Yeah. So there's that. On Beauty, I just hear a lot of good things about it.
Same. This whole time, I said this also before, but like I thought On Beauty was like an essay.
Because it's called On Beauty.
Absolutely not an essay.
Because of the title.
Yeah, because of the title. I was like, wow, this... Like, I thought this was... Like, I always thought that the book was like...
and of course, like...
one speech is on... Yeah. And also, see, Chimamanda.
Well, we
has a speech that's been novel.
We won't say yet why, but there's also something we have special planned for both the On Beauty and Grand Union episodes. We won't say what is yet, but you'll find out when we get there. I'm also excited for Grand Union because it's short fiction, and like over the last 5 years, I've kind of like come to really unearth my love for short fiction as a form and my appreciation for short fiction collections. Which reminds me, my next R&R that we're gonna post on the Instagram, I really have to get down to it because I told you I'd finished it long ago, and it was a short story collection. So you'll hear me talk about.
My next one is actually a little booklet that I just reread recently, and I'm gonna read it again before I write my R&R. But it's a book that I bought with you in England.
Hey, okay.
Yeah,
there you go.
So you'll see it coming up on the feed. Both of us got R&Rs.
Yeah, coming out in the next few weeks. And you can find that on Instagram and Twitter at the Rec Room Pod. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, feel free to follow us there for more updates, and also message us if you want to say anything about what you thought about any of the books that we've covered so far.
Yeah,
we
you
really
can totally talk to us. Both of us are online all the time.
We go crazy when people send us like notes or messages. It's just fun to hear from people, especially if people we don't know. Like, we deliberately planned this show to kind of like open up to like readers from all around the world. So, if you're from not the Philippines, please do hit us up.
Hit us up. We want to hear your perspectives too, because obviously, like especially when we were starting this and we had been reading books by like white novelists, like in our very first episode, we had a huge contention about emailing. Based on our own Asian perspective.
Right.
So if you have any ideas,
or like even like Eastern and Western in general, because like as I was telling you earlier, I realized like retroactively that I had seen people that I knew in England who were sending YouTube links to each other in emails.
In emails?
Yeah.
Right.
And okay, I won't say who they were obviously, but then that's a thing.
That was a whole thing.
Right. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, so hit us up. Let's be friends.
Hit us up there.
Let's talk about stuff.
And as always...
Wow.
I don't have any bit. I don't have any bit for the ending. Okay, goodbye.
Bye!
Thanks for listening to The Rec Room. This episode was edited by me. Our artwork is by Mandy. Our theme song is 64 Sundays by Twin Musicom, which is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution License. Check out more of their music at www.twinmusicom.org. For more updates on The Rec Room, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at The Rec Room Pod. Rec spelled R-E-Q.